I'm a god.
Well, what if there is no tomorrow?
I'm a god.
There wasn't one today.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of It's Time to Rewind, a podcast stuck in its own time loop right along with the movies we discuss. And this season, we're taking a look at Groundhog Day, after day, after day, after day. I'm your host, Bubba Wheat from Flights, Tights, and Movie Nights, and in this episode, we're discussing Phil's 32nd Groundhog Day that starts at 78 minutes and 57 seconds, with Phil badly playing Rachmaninoff's 18th variation from Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini, and ends at 79 minutes and 20 seconds, with Phil saying that his father was a piano mover. And once again, and for the last time, I'm joined by guest David Brook from Blueprint Review. How are you doing today?
Hello, not bad.
So I think this is really, the main reason why I brought you on, because I don't, as far as the film community and the film blogging community, piano playing doesn't come up very often. And we were both part of Jay Cluett's final episode hosting the Lambcast, and I remembered that you did you played music themes on the piano for him to guess.
Yes, I've done it, and I've done it on one other episode as well as one of the games at the end of a Lambcast. Now it's become my new little thing, and I'll have to do it again sometime. I do enjoy it. So yeah. As I said on a previous episode, I'm a seasoned pianist, but not amazing, not bad. As you probably, if anyone who's heard this episode will say, I'm not perfect. Which I guess brings us into this episode.
Yeah, so I'm going to let you take the. I did do a little bit of research as a music novice, but I'm going to let you take the lead here on what you think about anything that you know about this piece and about Bill Murray's piano playing and where we are.
Yeah, well, so it's from looking it up online. So it's one of those tunes that I find this with a lot of classical music. I've played a lot of classical music in the past. I do listen to it occasionally, but I don't always remember what the songs are called. So I did have to look it up, I'm afraid. But yeah, it's Sergei Rachmaninoff's Rhapsody on a Theme by Paganini, I believe, is what he's playing. Now, Rachmaninoff, if anyone's watched Shine, a film that was like the early 2000s, I think. Rachmaninoff his music is notoriously difficult. He makes some incredibly difficult songs. But saying that, Rhapsody on a Theme by Paganini, the bit that we hear Phil play, which is kind of the start of the song, isn't that complicated. It's well, at least not compared to some of Rachmaninoff's more kind of difficult work, and also later on, if you actually listen to the full song, it does get incredibly complicated.
Yeah,
but we never hear.
This is the movement, or this is the variation within the movement where it slows down.
Yeah. So it's, but at the same time, it's not that simple. And I mean, as you made comment just earlier saying how he was playing it badly. It's like, well, it's what I like about this scene is again, it's showing progression. It's showing he's learning it. So he is playing that song. He's not playing it brilliantly, but he's getting there. It sounds like someone trying to learn a piece, and which I quite like. But as I say, it sounds like he's not playing the full thing because it would get very difficult further on. But even then, to play what he's playing now would still take you in normal time if you were doing lessons weekly and things like that. You wouldn't be playing something like this for 3 or 4 years maybe. And so it would take a while to get there. But saying that, I did used to think in my head, oh no, he must have been playing for years to get this song. But actually, to be honest though, he is only playing this song. That's the thing. Well, although this brings another book, but I'm going to have to probably talk about a further episode a little bit, jump ahead a little bit. But yeah, just to learn one song. I mean, you see him playing scales at the beginning, which suggests that he's doing the gamut of piano playing, but I don't know. I kind of get the feeling, especially if he's just doing one-day lessons with this lady, I think he's just learning how to play this song for the most part. And just to learn one song wouldn't take as long as it would naturally. Like if I was teaching someone to play the piano, I would never give them that for years. But especially as an adult, if you just focus on one thing and you just want to learn how to play this, it's kind of a muscle memory thing. I know quite a few people who kind of learn the piano by ear, and they don't necessarily learn how to play the piano kind of. I don't want to use the word properly. That's a bit wrong, really. But like they don't learn it classically. And a lot of the time they will just learn how a piece is. Like they'll look online, and you get a lot of them now, YouTube videos that show you the piano and they show you what notes to hit where. So it's kind of just and if Phil was doing that, just learning where to put his fingers for this one song, it wouldn't take as long as normal. It wouldn't take 5 years, whatever it might normally take.
Yeah, and that actually, I like many people, played around learning music at one point in my life, but for me it was guitar, and I was learning, and of course this was actually before Guitar Hero, but I was learning how to play just specific songs, and I didn't learn how to read music. No. I would learn by they have just I forget what it's called, but they just showed you like where to put your fingers on the strings. And
chord books, yeah.
Yeah, and so I would learn like bits of songs that way.
And you can do that with the piano. But the only problem with this, and I don't want to jump ahead too far because I'm not actually talking about the final episode. The only thing is as I say, you could quite easily, if he was just learning how to play the Rhapsody on a Theme, you could probably quite easily do it in, I don't know, a few months or something. But in the final scene, you see him playing like boogie woogie piano, incredibly fast, incredibly complicated kind of stuff, which would be much more difficult to learn. But also on top of that, the start, because he's kind of playing boogie woogie, kind of a bluesy boogie woogie jazzy sort of number. It sounds like he's improvising and he's comping on the piano. To learn that would take years. Like you can't just instantly learn how to improvise. You need to understand music quite deeply. You need to. I mean, I've played for 34 years and I've tried to do jazz lessons and I can do a little bit, but certainly not to that level.
Yeah, it's like you need to learn the music theory and not just how to play.
And you need an enormous amount of practice to be that fluid and to be able to improvise. Because what happens at the end of I'm jumping ahead too far really, but he plays this kind of boogie woogie piano piece, but then he turns that into the Rachmaninoff song, and then he even adapts the Rachmaninoff to turn it into a jazz kind of number, which again is incredibly difficult, and it takes quite a strong grasp of jazz music, which is incredibly hard.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like you said, you're jumping ahead, so I haven't looked too deeply at that. Like I know that it comes up, and it's perfectly fine to talk about that. Because I'm not having someone that knows anything about piano for that episode, so I'm okay with jumping ahead. But like you mentioned, it's not just learning to play; it's also basically learning how to compose his own music.
Yeah.
And that's a completely different skill. I mean, it's related, but it's a completely different way to learn music.
Absolutely. Which suggests that he could be in there a long, long time.
And that I think, the two things that we see in these 2 days are really the bulk, like for people that do analyze this film and how long that he's been in here, that is really the bulk of the time that comes, because everything else, he can do in days or weeks, potentially like months at the max. But for each individual thing that we see him do, it could just take him, just a few days. But this is something where to get to the level that he's at by the end, it really would take not even just the 10,000 hours that a lot of people reference, but it takes a lot of dedicated time, practice, and study.
Yeah, and he's got all the other stuff to learn and do in the time that comes up in the end as well. So it's an awful lot.
And then I did mention that I studied, like I looked up a little bit of information about the piece that he plays, and Paganini himself, his original work, he did 24 Caprices for solo violin. And he was, a very celebrated musical star during his time. He was extremely popular. And then Rachmaninoff was the one that, I'm going to call it, he like remixed it and for solo piano. And that ended up becoming a huge success for him. And it's his piece consists of 24 variations, which just me looking at it as a novice, it's like there's all these different terms, and a lot of them don't necessarily make sense, but from what I can piece together, like there's 24 variations where it's basically like just 24 sections of a larger song. And the piece that we hear is the 18th variation. And, like you mentioned, a lot of the entire piece is very complex. There's a lot more higher energy pieces. And this is the point during the piece where it does slow down and become more romantic. Mm-hmm. And most people consider that this is the most famous variation and one that's used in a lot of different places.
Yeah. And interesting, this is a bit of a random side note, I don't know how relevant it is, but kind of going back to how the difference between what he's learning about that Rhapsody on a Theme song that he's playing compared to the kind of jazzy stuff that he plays later is that because Rachmaninoff was he was around still in the 20th century, and there are a lot of reports of him becoming aware of Art Tatum, who was a very famous kind of early jazz pianist, and Rachmaninoff, who's famous for being one of the greatest pianists of all time, he actually said that Art Tatum was the greatest piano player he'd ever heard, even though he's playing a completely different style to his. And that kind of shows how even someone that respected in the piano in the classical field knows how difficult what some of the jazz players are playing. And not that Phil plays as well as Art Tatum, because if you ever listen to him, it's unbelievable. Like, it's baffling how fast and complex some of the stuff he plays is. But still, it's kind of in that ballpark. So again, it's showing how much of a shift he makes in musically.
And I don't know how true this is, especially the way that it's shot. But according to IMDb trivia, in this scene specifically, it actually is Bill Murray playing the piano.
Really? Yeah. I'm surprised because it is a cutaway. Like it shows a close up of hands playing. It never shows Bill Murray. If you know what I mean, you never see a long shot with him and his hands. So to me, that suggests that's not true.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, if he was playing it, surely they'd have had a shot where you could see him. They could pull back a bit so you could actually see him playing it. You'd have thought there'd be no point in learning it because of the way it was shot. But so I don't know. I'm dubious about that IMDb claim.
Yeah, I am as well. They said that he didn't learn to read sheet music, but he did learn to play that much of it just by playing it by ear, like we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I don't think that's far fetched. I think it's just because of the way it's shot. I think that's probably not true, unless he learnt it, but maybe couldn't play it either well or badly enough for the scene, or it wasn't quite right for the scene. So perhaps they shot that cutaway as backup. But it does suggest in the way they've shot that, I don't believe it. But yeah, it's perfectly. Yeah, I wouldn't say Bill Murray couldn't. He could easily just over a few weeks or months or whatever just learn that short chunk of it easily enough.
And out of curiosity, that this is kind of a related question, but as someone, like, if you're playing a piece that you know pretty well, how difficult is it to intentionally play like a beginner?
To intentionally play about
I'm sure that's something that's not necessarily ever come up.
I don't know. I don't think it's too difficult to pretend to be kind of bad at something. It's weird. No, I guess it's not too difficult to kind of knowingly make some mistakes. although if you're playing from memory and it's something that's really drilled into your mind, it might be more difficult. But as I say, I'm more of a sheet music player. I think I could pretend to play a sheet music really badly quite easily,
Mm-hmm.
if you know what I mean. But yeah, I guess there's some songs that are totally stuck in my brain that it might be more difficult because you just automatically know where you're going. I don't know. It's a funny one because I know people. I don't know if you're mentioning that in terms of, because I know a lot of people have talked about how difficult it can be to sing badly for someone who's trained in singing. Because there's some kind of I try to think of those. An example I was listening to recently. Oh no, it was a really random example. It was like a deleted song from Robin Hood, the Disney version. But there's one in that. It's I think it's Peter. There's a song of Pete. I think it's Peter Ustinov, whatever his name is, who plays Prince John. And he's there's like a deleted song where he's singing really, really badly. And I always find that quite amusing because I mean, I don't know if Peter Ustinov was necessarily much of a singer, but he was a stage performer and things like that. So I assume that he probably was musically trained too. And it's so horribly off. You can tell it's almost cleverly off. And it is quite an art, I think, for a professional singer to sing off. But I think playing the piano is a bit different because it's easy enough to just hit a wrong key and play out of rhythm and that kind of thing.
Okay. And then the last little bit of trivia that I looked up that I noticed, because we don't really see a whole lot in this scene. I did notice the scene starts off, and so did the previous one with the piano, like a close up of this old like this very old looking wedding photo.
Yeah.
Which I would have to imagine that's probably. It would have to be like one of Peggy's older relatives that she just was handed down.
Parents or something, yeah.
But I also noticed that the piano itself was a Kimball, and Kimball is apparently one of the most famous and successful piano manufacturers, and they were based out of Chicago, which I think is interesting because this was filmed in Woodstock, a suburb of Chicago. And they started in the late 19th century, and they continued to make Kimball branded pianos up until 1996 was whenever they discontinued pianos with the Kimball brand name on them.
So this wasn't long before they stopped then when Groundhog Day was made.
Yeah.
You also get the nice kind of similar shot to the ice sculpting one where you get the reveal in a nice kind of pan around. It's another nice shot.
I think I realized that I asked you how long that you thought Phil was stuck in Groundhog Day at this point, but I haven't asked you yet. How long do you think Easy was stuck through the entirety of the film?
Again, I keep changing my mind. I think I'd written down somewhere like 10 years on my notes, but the more I think about it, when I think about the ice sculpting and it's that level he gets to at the end on the piano that really gets me, which suggests maybe it's even longer, maybe even 20 years. I don't know, maybe 15 to go in the middle. certainly post 10, I think. He does so much. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'd lean high. I'd lean 15 maybe, if that's high. It's high in my mind.
Sure, but it's up there. I think Danny Rubin, the writer, would often say that the idea was that he was stuck for about 10 years. But it's changed. Like I mentioned, it's changed several times. And then the last thing that I'm curious about is, we see a lot of different days, and with Phil being in a lot of different moods within 15 years, that's a lot of days that we don't see. So what would be like a day that Phil most likely had but didn't make it to the film? Like something that you might have wanted to see, like a deleted scene.
I think for me, what I always find is missing. You kind of get it, but it's not as obsessed over as I kind of would have done. Is you don't see him trying to break the curse, like trying to. You don't. He does. He stays up with greeter, doesn't he? But they fall asleep there. You don't really show them watching the clock. For me, not just that, I think because we kind of get them staying up late anyway. But you don't really see Phil trying to reset time or kind of break the curse. I thought he'd try a bit harder. I know he goes to a psychiatrist and stuff, but I'd think he'd go to more drastic measures. And I kind of want to see him staying up past midnight and realizing, oh, it's past midnight, it's worked, and then you realize it's actually later in the day that it resets. And I don't know, I kind of feel like that could be more expanded on, because in my mind I'd want to get out of it. I'd want to. I don't know. I think they could have come up with some bizarre techniques of trying to reset it. You could have a little montage of him getting to 5:59. Is it 6 o'clock when it actually resets? I can't remember doesn't he say? I can't remember.
Well, he says 6 o'clock, but I think based on what we see in the film, I don't think it would be too much of a stretch to say that it actually resets at 5:59.
Yeah, no. But you kind of, I'd kind of want to see a little montage of him staying up at 5:59 and trying something ridiculous to kind of fix it. And I mean, obviously he tries to kill himself and stuff, but that's not necessarily resetting the time. I think it's just getting out of everything in general. But I don't know. I'd want to see him get out of it.
Yeah, I could see that, and I think that we do get a little, like, I think it's a more subtle version of that, where it's not more explicitly spelled out, but I think there are like 3 specific times where he is doing something that I think is him either actively trying to break the loop or him thinking that possibly, he might have done something that would have broken the loop. The first one is whenever he starts breaking the clock.
Yeah.
I think that is really his first time where where that's like the symbol of what brings him back every day. Yeah. And so he goes through trying to break that.
Yeah. I always get that more as frustration. He's like, oh, not another good day. I always see that as more frustration than trying to get out of the loop. I don't know, but yeah, maybe.
And then right after that, then he goes after both the groundhog and himself. Whenever he kidnaps the groundhog and then kills both of them in a fiery explosion, and then he wakes up the next day and he's like, dang.
Yeah.
And then the third time is whenever he has, the science experiment day with Rita, and then, we saw that at the beginning of our days here that he maybe he wasn't really super hopeful that, like, he didn't really expect that would break the loop, but he still double checks.
Yeah, and I guess at that stage he has stayed up and tried it. Like, you get that idea from what he says, as well. But but I don't know. You kind of expect to see him watching that clock. But at the same time, that might be quite cheesy. You don't want some sort of magical, like, like suddenly reappears in bed. I get he probably wouldn't do it like that. It'd just be a cut, but yeah, I don't know. I kind of almost expect him to see him watching that clock, basically. But it works fine without it. I still think the film's amazing. It doesn't need that, but whenever I see it, I always feel like if it were me, then I'd spend more time experimenting in resetting it.
Yeah, I think I would probably be about the same way. But, once again, I'd like to thank you for joining me on these past 4 episodes. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, no, I've had fun. So it's been good to talk about it.
And why don't you go ahead and, for the last time, remind everybody where they can find you online?
Yep, so blueprintreview.co.uk for all your film review needs and soundtracks and games. Yeah.
And as always, I'm Bubbleweeds, and you can find me at flightstightomovienights.com. You can find me on Twitter at Bubbleweeds, and you can find the show It's Time to Rewind on Anchor.fm, as well as anywhere else where you listen to podcasts. And you can join our Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, where you can comment on episodes as they come out, find out about what future seasons will be, and hopefully I'll have more stuff out there. And Until next time, I just keep thinking of, every time I hear Rachmaninoff, it reminds me of that scene in Willy Wonka, which it wasn't Rachmaninoff, I don't believe, but there we are.
I'm a god.
Well, what if there is no tomorrow?
I'm a god.
There wasn't one today.
Not bad, Mr. Connors. You say this is your first lesson?
Yes, but my father was a piano mover, so.